Hey, Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm just pulling open our Facebook page so that I can see any questions when they come in. And I'm super excited. This is our number 2
It's
video.
fun. Yeah, I know. It's pretty cool. First one was fun. I'll be honest, I was nervous, but we got through it. It was good.
Yep. Yeah, you did a great job. And we got some great questions and a lot of great interaction, which is fantastic. So today we're going to be talking about a bit of a different topic than the last one. So this topic is really about AV travel fees. So why do planners have to pay for them? How can they get out of paying for them? What are some tips for planners? So I'm really excited for today's topic.
Absolutely. And I'm just putting on a bunch of do not disturb stuff so my computer doesn't blow up at me. But yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a good topic for sure. And it's an interesting one in the industry because I feel like it's probably the biggest pitfall that AV companies have in creating and sustaining partnerships. So yeah, and that's been definitely a piece that we've thrived on in our relationships. It's kind of an interesting topic. So should be good.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So let's get started. Hello to Jessica. We've got Jessica watching right now. Actually, we've got a few viewers, which is awesome. Okay. So first, let's start off with the very basic groundwork question, which is why are travel fees charged in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I think at its simplest level, it's just an offset, a way for the companies, to offset their fees of getting trucks around. You've got a relatively high cost to produce shows in other parts of the go into it. And I think that there's, it's one of those things that's just kind of always been done. And I think companies have really held on to it, but it's a line item expense on any AV production company's profit and loss statement. And I think accordingly, they offset it with charges.
So I'll be honest, when you first started to talk, you kind of cut out to me. So I know, Jessica, you're watching right now. If you can just comment below, is the audio cutting out for you or are you hearing it just fine? If you're there, Jessica, if you can let me know.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Okay. So let's continue on and hopefully, fingers crossed, we're not going to have any audio issues today. So basically, it's what I heard you saying is it's kind of just status quo. It's the way that it's done in the industry. And it's a way. Okay. So Kelly, who is watching, hi, Kelly, said it did cut out for a second when Chris was talking. It's okay now. Okay. So we'll pay attention to that and just make sure that we watch that. Thank you very
guys,
much, Kelly.
if you have that issue, comment and let us know. Obviously, we'll try and work through it. But yeah, well, so then I'll kind of give the 30-second rundown on what I had said since it cut out. But essentially, it's been the status quo in the industry. You asked why AV companies charge travel fees. It's just become the status quo. It's an expense that we all face, getting our equipment and our people and, the logistics behind it into place for an event. And, I think the old way of thinking has always been offset that expense with a bill to cover it and off you go.
Right.
I also think it's the right way. That's definitely the way it's always been done.
Okay, so let's talk about that because when I first started working with you, it's been about 1.5 years now or something like that.
Yeah.
I remember when I sat down with you and I was like, tell me what makes your company unique or different. That was one of the things that came through is that you don't charge for travel fees. And I was like, what? You don't charge for travel fees? That's so standard in the industry. So why don't you talk about why you don't believe in charging for those travel fees?
Well, I think anybody who knows me or knows of our company and the way we operate, life is about the partnership. It's all about the partnership. I remember very, very early on in business, picking up every business book that came recommended. And of course, there's some standards that just about every entrepreneur, and one of them that I read was Tony Hsieh's book on Zappos. And one of the things he talked about was how they're almost all of their shipping. It's not literally all of it, but a majority of the things that they do that are unique in their shipping process, they actually expense to a marketing budget and they use it as a way to build client relationships. So anything from the free returns that they offer to oftentimes, you'll pay for their standard or you'll get their standard shipping for free, which is theoretically ground shipping. And your package will arrive the next day. That's an upgrade that they took the expense to offer. to help build the relationship and make you that much more excited. I mean, you press it. I think it's probably the big thing with online retail, right? The waiting time. That's probably the one thing that keeps big box stores around, is that you can walk out and get it that day. Well, Zappos kind of eliminated that hurdle by saying we're going to offer our standard shipping for free, and then we're going to upgrade you at no charge. Boom. Their customers are super happy and kind of wowed by that experience. For us, I remember we had a customer years ago, probably now 10 years ago, that we worked with in Charlotte, and the event went really well. Everyone was excited. We were talking about how we could keep the partnership going, and the planner came back to me and said, our bylaws don't actually allow us to travel a company. They view AV as a commodity industry, which we kind of touched on in our last Facebook Live, but they view AV as kind of a commodity industry, and how can they justify spending money to travel a commodity when you can go get another commodity locally. And I thought, let's just kind of roll the dice on this concept of Zappos, and let's see what happens if we don't nickel and dime for all these different fees along the way, but instead turn it into a partnership that could last 10 or 15 years and we make it up in the long run. So we rolled the dice, we did it. It was a success, a particular client over the next few shows, and we expanded the program across the board.
Okay. Great. So the concept or the idea is, you work with a client and understand that the objective is to work with them over the long run. So you absorb those travel fees, and in turn, you're building a relationship with somebody who wants to be able to take their AV company from city to city to city, no matter where it is in the U.S., and have that consistency in that relationship.
Well, absolutely. And I think the probably biggest point of positive feedback we've received from our customers is the fact they don't have to reinvent the wheel now every time, right? When you sit in the mindset that AV is just a commodity and all you're getting is the equipment, you're losing sight of the people and the relationships and the experience that you build on in time. There's no question, like when we produce an event for a first-time client, it goes well. No question though, the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth events go even better because of the history we've built with that customer.
Right.
And when a customer has a hurdle of paying, you work with them in a local market and there's no travel fees, and then you tell them, hey, your next event, we really want to work with you again, but your next event's going to be several $1,000s more because of the travel. You've just added a hurdle to the relationship. My whole mindset is let's avoid hurdles. Why put an impediment to continue to work together? So we kind of rolled the dice on the idea. It's worked out because those relationships have lasted for several years. I don't know that it would work if it was every show was just a one-off kind of a thing, but the partnership is really what has paid the dividends for that trade-off. So
makes sense. Okay, so I'm a planner and I'm watching this right now. I'm not currently working with you, Crescent Events. I'm working with somebody else. So how do I go about finding a partner that maybe doesn't charge travel fees? Or how do I go about working with an existing supplier and somehow work it out so that I don't pay travel fees?
Well, that's tough. I mean, if you're working with an existing provider and you want to keep working with them and they're accustomed to charging travel fees, that's a slippery slope to try. Well, you can go back and ask them to stop charging them. They may say no. What you could definitely do though is try and negotiate some fixed amounts to go with that. In my 15 years of running events, and we have at times had travel fees because maybe a super last minute booking. An event gets booked literally 2 days before load-in, and our travel fees are skyrocketed. And so we tell the client, we are going to have to charge something for a flight here, whatever the case may be, but we'll cap it at X, Y, and Z. So I think that that's not an unfair request. Also, working with your provider on how many people are they traveling in. If they're charging you for every flight, they don't necessarily need to be traveling in the people who are going to set up, say, pipe and drape and screens. They could be traveling in some key operators, but they don't need to be traveling everybody in, because that'll obviously reduce the number of flights, the number of hotel rooms, all that kind of stuff. And then again, just where I think working with them on capping things, and then also working together on, everything from even their food on site, making sure they get if they can get adequate meal breaks, or maybe if they don't, you're going to help provide food so that it doesn't become meal penalty costs and all those other things that go into bringing a traveling crew in and having, work days become crazy, or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of things you can do, but I think if you have an existing relationship that you want to preserve, you have to kind of go into it understanding that you might be trying to change the status quo. And while that's okay, you want to do it in a way that's sensitive to what you've always, historically done with that particular relationship.
So let's say in the negotiation phase, I'm a planner and I'm talking to my AV company, and they don't have an existing protocol where they don't charge travel fees. So I'm going to them and requesting for them to remove it. Is there a way for me to be able to soften that negotiation? So in other words, talking to them about, if you're able to remove travel fees, I will be willing to sign on for multi-year or something along those lines?
Absolutely. And that we have done that. We've gone down that road in the past where, where we were concerned about maybe the overall budget on the show and the travel fees being something, yeah, we're going to absorb them because that is the way we operate it. But it might make this one particular show, it's kind of questionable as to whether or not we want to go after it at that point. So then we'll work with them on let's put together some sort of maybe a multi-year with an out clause after the very first show, and it's kind of a no questions asked out clause. I mean, my philosophy on something like that is we're going to do a good job, and I will roll the dice on our margin on the first show we do together on the basis that we'll do a good job. And if you don't feel like we did, then you can get out of the contract, the multi-year part of the contract, without having to retroactively pay for those travel fees or anything like that. And I think it really comes down to a kind of a confidence level that we have internally that we're going to do an amazing job, that we're going to wow the client.
Right. Yeah. So what would you say are the biggest travel fees? Is it airfare? Is it hotel? What are the biggest chunks?
Yeah, well, I mean, it can be all of the above. Airfare, hotels, trucking. Trucking's a huge one. You've got driver, fuel, insurance, road time, permits, all that kind of stuff, depending on how big the show is and what the trucking situation may be. But it even can come down to parking vehicles. It can come down to, Ubers to and from the airport. I mean, it's granted, it's relatively inexpensive, but they all add up, right? I mean, one flight's not terrible, but when you're traveling in 10 people and they all need hotel rooms, and then you got, a truck or two coming into the venue and parking and all this stuff, it adds up. It can be several thousands of dollars.
Got it. Okay, so I made you kind of do this off the cuff. So I'm going to recap what you talked about. So you said if you're working with an AV supplier, you basically have one option, which is to go back to that AV supplier and try and renegotiate no travel fees. Or at least if they're unable to renegotiate no travel fees, then you talked about three different things. So really understanding how many people are traveling and making sure that you're managing that based on the minimums you need to be able to do the job well. So you're not going to be paying for an exorbitant number of people traveling to your event. Cap those costs so that you have an understanding of what your maximum cost will be, so you're not getting a big surprise. And then you also mentioned food on site. So can you go into a little bit more detail about the food?
Well, and it could be like per diems, for example. If you're bringing in a bunch of people and you're already doing, say, staff meals for your team, perhaps including the AV team, and that could help offset costs of per diems. I mean, per diems can be pretty significant if you go out to whatever it is, the IRS website, and they find out what the per diem is in a local marketplace. It can add up pretty quickly. And again, it comes back to how many people you're traveling in, because those are the ones who would actually need per diem. But then, if your work schedule is one that has limited breaks, not only are you going to go a long ways with your AV team if they have limited breaks to support them through getting them a meal where they might otherwise only have time to run out and get fast food or something, that just kind of, but the other side of it is you could offset some pretty significant per diem fees by just including them in, a staff buffet lunch you're already doing or something of that nature. And again, it all comes down to the negotiation. Some companies they'll say, hey, we appreciate the lunch and we're still going to charge our per diem. It's just, there's different elements to that. I mean, I'll be honest, we look more to a client to support us on the meal front from a scheduling perspective. We still give our traveling team per diem, even if a client is going to offer meals.
Right.
But we look more for the client to support us if there's a scheduling challenge that will just make simply just getting out to get a meal a challenge. That's just, so that's kind of our fault. But there's, like I said, there's just a lot of variables to it that you can work in. And I just think it's about having an open, honest dialogue about here's what we're trying to accomplish. We want to keep these fees in check or non-existent. And then seeing what they'll do, generally speaking, in exchange for, let's talk about a bigger picture partnership here as opposed to a one-off event. I think that all too often companies get stuck in the mindset of, let me maximize 110% maximize my revenue on this one show. And it's just not a philosophy I believe in. I think let's create a partnership. Your events are going to go better. We'll have continuous revenue and relationships that can count on your shows, for years to come. And together we'll grow in quality. So
awesome. And I should mention at this stage too, if anybody does have a question that you'd like to ask Chris around travel fees or around travel for team members of your AV company, please ask them below in the comment section, and we will absolutely get to those questions. So Chris, if you were to kind of give your top 2 or 3 takeaways from this talk and say, here are the things that are really important for planners to think about when they're thinking about how to lower those AV travel fees, what would they be?
I think probably look for I guess I would say, to try to figure out the right wording for it, but I guess it's kind of look at your AV company as a partner, and that's reciprocal, right? You're asking for something, reduce or eliminate these travel fees. So what can I give you in return that's going to be of value to you possibly in the long run? I mean, again, our philosophy is we'll eat a few $1,000s in travel fees. We'll do an amazing job. I'm not asking anybody to work with us simply because we don't charge travel fees. And I don't think any, sane-minded planner would do so. But, the idea is we'll eliminate this several $1,000s in travel fees, but we'll get to work with you for years to come. So I think looking at your AV provider instead of as just a commodity vendor, but look at them as a partner, and then figure out how you can work with them in that to make it mutually beneficial for them to remove those travel fees. That's item 1. Item 2, you could definitely, if you don't have an existing relationship, include it in your RFP, put it out the bid and say, this is just not something we're willing to cover. If you have an existing relationship you're trying to preserve, that's where you have to kind of look at how you can partner up on it. But if you don't have an existing relationship, see what you can do to leverage the RFP process to earn that, that kind of concession. And then the third thing is just be cognizant of what the travel fees are and how can you help cap them, and how many people are you traveling in and what roles? Hey, is there any chance of hiring that role more locally as opposed to having to travel them in? If you are traveling them in, obviously flight costs can get crazy. Are you booking your team first class or coach? Are you sharing rooms, or are you not sharing rooms? There's a lot of variables there that you can understand better and get kind of a little bit more in on the nuts and bolts of. And then work with your vendor to say, okay, we'll cover travel fees, but maybe only to, $500 a flight, and double down in the rooms, and whatever the case may be. There's definitely a lot of angles you can do there, but I think that comes down to looking at the specificity of it and trying to work with your provider to, to understand what they're doing, what the goals are, and help navigate that so that they're capped.
It's interesting from today's talk, and then the one that we did a few weeks ago. What's become a really interesting theme is know your contract details. Really ask questions and dig deep. So you've just talked about really be aware of the fees. And I assume, and I might be assuming incorrectly because I've never actually looked at an AV company's invoice other than yours. I assume that it's probably a line item for travel fees, or is it detailed breakdown?
Yeah, no, oftentimes what I find to be the scariest when I've reviewed other AV companies' contracts with customers is oftentimes it's a line item that's not specified. It's, travel fees will be added for, 4 technicians, flights, hotel rooms, per diems, blah, 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 blah. But there's no dollar amount provided.
Right.
And we've absolutely won relationships, won accounts, and built relationships on the fact that, we might be apples to apples in the initial bid, but then they're like, oh my goodness, that could be $1,000 or it could be $10,000. I don't know. And that scares a lot of planners off, I think justifiably so. And again, I think that, that's kind of that third point that I make is if you are going to pay travel fees, get clear on what they are and get the company you're working with to commit to capping them.
So I actually think that could be a really great giveaway from today's talk. So last talk we gave a cheat sheet, and I think a really good cheat sheet for this talk could be what are the top 5 or 6 or 7 different line item questions you should be asking to get clarity on where your travel fees are going.
Yeah, just to make sure they're not going to come kind of bite you on the back end when the final invoice comes through.
Yeah, for sure. So for anybody who does want one of that cheat sheet, just comment yes below. And as you can tell, because we feel really strongly that we want to be able to build value for anybody watching this. So oftentimes we won't create a cheat sheet until we know what your questions are, or if we know where the conversation goes, because a lot of great things come out of the questions that not only happen on the live show, but also after the live show is done. So the cheat sheet will take a little bit for us to pull together, but if you are interested in getting a hold of it, all you have to do is comment yes in the comment section, and we will be sure to get that off to you.
Absolutely.
So, Chris, do you have any other lasting comments that you want to put out there?
You know, it's funny you said that you talked about the kind of the common theme from last to this, and I think the other one is that I would say, and I would say will probably come up on every single Facebook Live we do in some sense or another, is find and build a partnership. Like, I think that there's just an old way of kind of going back to the travel being a kind of an old way of thinking, oh, you're going to charge for this, that, and the other. It's just kind of become a standard accepted thing. I think it's all too common to view an AV company as, because it's been a commodity industry for so many years, as a vendor. And I think the moment you can snap out of the vendor mindset, yeah, I think at the end of the day, any AV provider understands that on site, there's a hierarchy and that the person in charge running the event is passing information on to the AV provider and they're facilitating it. So yes, I don't think there's any question about the hierarchy of who's directing what. But the moment you can look at them as a partner and rely on their expertise, their help, their support, and then in doing so, build a relationship that lasts for years, you're going to realize economies of scale, you're going to realize savings, and you're going to realize much more successful events because you can build that relationship over time. So,
well said, and a really great place to end today's chat. So thank you so much, Chris.
My pleasure.
Good number 2, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was fun.
Awesome. And thank you, everybody who did come out for the live show. Kelly has commented here. I'm just going to put this up. So Kelly has commented, love Crescent Event Productions. You've been partners for years now. They come alongside us and become part of our team and help make our meetings great. Always a pleasure working with them. So nice.
Love it. Thank you.
Thanks for saying that. That was a great way to end today's chat. So
absolutely.
Thanks, Chris. And again, please comment below if you have any questions, and please comment below if you're interested in getting that cheat sheet. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.